Well, so glad to have you here, Peter Gibbs. So I want to introduce you to our church, Hope You See. I heard your story, or part of your story, over a year ago, and it really impressed me. Number one, you're a fantastic public speaker. But I suppose more importantly for me anyway, and that's why I'd love to learn more about who you are, is that I felt like your spirit, there's something really powerful about your story, your journey, and how you've navigated that. So maybe you can just help us out a little bit. You were born in a remote New South Wales country town. What's that called?
A little place called Wellmaringle.
Wellmaringle.
Most people would have heard of the back of Burke.
Yeah, the back of Burke.
Everybody associates the country New South Wales. You say the back of Burke. Well, it's 2 hours north of Burke, so it's very remote. Not many people have heard of Wellmaringle.
No.
But it's still a community, a strong community today.
So growing up as a kid in this remote community, you use an expression which you say it was semi-traditional. So help me, this sort of Aussie kid from Ipswich, what does that mean when you say, like, what do it mean on a Monday or a Saturday or a Sunday?
When I say semi-traditional, I mean semi-traditional. I would say we lived a fairly traditional life. Yeah. Our staple diet was emu, kangaroo, the fish from the river nearby, porcupine. They were our main meats. And we grow our own vegetables. There was still Aboriginal culture being practiced almost daily in the community, particularly by some of the elders who were in their late 80s, early 90s. We lived in a absolute just tin humpy, banged up four walls with a roof that leaked every time it rained and a dirt floor. And that's just how you lived. I would wake up every day as a young kid and you could hear the old fellas making their own artefacts, carving their own emu eggs to try and make some money. Language was still being spoken. Christmas meant really for us, it was an emu on the table. Wow. You might have some other decorations and so on, but that sort of diet is what you grew up with. Wow. And so I associate very clearly semi-traditional life. Yeah. Yes, we did have a school that went to year 6, still does today. So we got some mainstream education as well, but you only went to school from 9 till 3. Everything else is associated in your community. In terms of the way we dressed, shorts was it. Wow. So I would normally associate shorts and a snotty nose. That's how we lived.
And you played footy as well, right? Did you play footy in the bush or?
Oh, the old fellas used to park their cars at 1 yard and turn up the radio because we had no TV. So they're listening to the ABC, and particularly on the Saturday and Sunday afternoons, they would blare the footy. Wow. So we were listening to the names of Beatson and Redonicus and all these Fulton, famous footy names with the ABC radio. Yeah, wow. And then what would we used to do? We'd grab a tin or something that we could pass. And so we were, thinking about what it would be like to play in the ARL then.
Playing footy with a tin. I mean, that's pretty hardcore. Did you sort of pursue rugby league at all?
Oh, absolutely. I think the dreams of running around on our clay pan, we'd mark out the field and we'd always want to be, Beatson, Bobby Fulton, Steve Rogers, all these guys who were famous footballers. They became heroes for us, but we'd never ever seen them. We didn't have a TV, we didn't get newspapers, there was no rugby league weeks, there was no publications, but the ABC radio is what we were sort of tuned into. I knew then that's what I want to do. Wow. I want to get off Wellmaringle. I had no idea where Sydney was. There was a map. There was a map at our school, but that was about it. Yeah. But I wanted to be a rugby league player. Wow. And I thought whatever I could do and I don't know how far away I had to go, but I really wanted to become a rugby league player.
So on your clay football pitch in Wellmaringle, passing a tin around as a ball, did you have aspirations for playing rugby?
Pastor, I just knew that is what I wanted to do. Yeah. In our community, all you could really do was play out here on the clay pan and shear a sheep. I didn't want to really do that. I wanted to be a rugby league player. And I just knew in my heart at that time, if I could just find a way to be able to do it, that's what I want to do. And I used to tell my mum, I want to be a rugby league player.
So which players did you idolise when you were growing up?
At the time, and still is now, one of the greatest players to ever play the game is Arthur Beetson, an Aboriginal man from Queensland. And we used to listen to his name on the radio, and you could either through the radio, the skill of this person and the presence he had on a footy field, and I thought, that is what I want to do. I want to follow this man. I want to be able to one day do what he's doing.
Wow. You had some personal connection with Artie.
Absolutely. As I started to grow and develop as a player and got a name, and I started to make representative teams in the bush, I got a call one day, Peter, it's Arthur Beetson here. I almost fainted.
Wow.
I thought it was a joke. I thought somebody is having me on. He says, no, I want to talk to you about coming to Sydney to play. So I think I took quite a while to consider it, possibly 5 seconds, and said, when can I come?
Wow.
And so I got to play under him. It was his sort of last time that he was coaching, his last club, and I was able to play under him. I actually lived with him for a little while.
Wow.
So he actually started to mentor me and really give me the insight into not just footy, but life.
So Peter, in that community where you were living, you talk about your grandmother as a real woman of God and the legacy that you inherited from her. How did you interact with her when you were living as a young boy?
Because if we look at Will Maringle, at the time we're talking about, I was born in 66, 1 year before a very important and significant time in a chronology of events for Aboriginal people. 67 was a real line in the sand. In the western part of New South Wales, where most of our families worked, but welfare just started to rear its ugly head. Whilst I was a very young boy in a remote community, welfare starts to come, the grog is starting to really infiltrate our people. It wasn't a really nice time. Yet this person in my life was so important, Pastor, because you needed a stabilising influence in your family. And I can remember every night when she read the Bible to us, prayed for us, told us God has called us to be leaders, instilling in me as a very young person. And I knew then that things are going to be all right, even though outside every day it didn't look too good. So she sowed the seed, what Jesus has done for us. And we don't have to anymore look down. We need to look up. And I've held on to that. Yeah. Hopefully, even in the twists and turns of life that we all have, I've always tried to look up.
Yeah. For us as a church, we've been speaking about legacy over the last number of months. And I just think it's a great testimony. She's now passed, I understand. What a wonderful woman to be in the midst of all of that momentum, to be sowing seeds of hope. You get to year 6, as we know, and then you have to move, right? What happens next?
Simply the saddest but most joyful part of our life, because my great-grandfather, his name is Jack Orcher, made a commitment to the Catholic Church then because it really meant going away to school. Boarding school for us was something never on our agenda. But I have to thank my pop for this, because the most toughest decision is that a generation of ours was going to be educated. The day before, you're running around with shorts and no shoes and no shirt. The day after that, you're in polished school shoes and iron trousers and ties and all the things that go with private school. And so you've got this sort of life that just changed, so dramatic.
Wow. And
so far away from home. And I cried every day for 3 years. I went from year 7 to year 9 until it got to the point where I told my dad that if I can't get out of this school, I'm going to run away. So you need to get me out of this school, because it was just so difficult to be able to walk in those two worlds without the support of your family.
So Peter, you're at boarding school. So when you call your dad and say, please get me out of here, what would he say to you?
My dad really is my dad, and he's the leader of your family. But he, at the time in Will Maringle, wasn't the leader of the community. So there was sort of like a higher level authority within the community, governed by my great great-grandfather, Jack Orchard, because he had a community-wide or family-wide commitment to our generation. All parents bought into it. Everybody supported us to go away. There was quite a crew of us that went away. It would have been quite easy for my prop, without that vision for education, to keep the young fellas in your community, raise them up. They're our next generation of shearers, next generation of fathers and so on. But he saw a much bigger vision. I need an educated group. I need an educated group of young people who will help our people in the future. Without an education, we would perish. Yeah. And he could see the demise coming from welfare. He could see the decline in work in the agricultural industry. My grandfather was a visionary. And I thank him so dearly that I had that great start in education. It gave me a look at the world outside of Wilmaringle. It gave me an opportunity to start talking to our white mates who live not far away, but they lived in a different world, and we needed to see that. Otherwise, we could only see what we could see inside the levee banks of Wilmaringle.
So year 10 was a tipping point for you. What happened next?
Year 10 was a perfect opportunity, was to go to Newcastle to join the Aboriginal student hostel movement, because it gave our remote kids an opportunity to stay in an Aboriginal environment with house parents and so on, but still pursue that passion for education and opportunity, particularly in rugby league, which was still burning in my heart about that. So it was great. I got to go to Newcastle.
Wow.
And I couldn't believe what that community offered me. I got the opportunity to swim in the ocean. Like, for us coming from Wilmaringle, to swim in the ocean, it is like this is, and we got to do it every day if we wanted to. Wow. And I got to pursue education, because I always kept that strong belief in my education, but then I got to play footy.
Wow.
And I started to play footy at a level that I could only dream about. I represented my country as a schoolboy.
Wow.
And straight from the bush. So with only 1 year of really good coaching, because of the talent that I was blessed with, I excelled, and I got that recognition then as a young boy, and people could see at a very young age that I could play the game.
Wow. Did you then enter university? What did you do next?
So I started to really go after footy, and I started to walk away a little bit from the further education, which was there afforded to me, but I started to concentrate there. But then I started to hit the teenage boys' years as well. And in the time parallel to all this is losing my mum very early. So you didn't have mum back home. And mum died when I was in year 6. So I didn't have that. That hit the grog pretty hard. Home life became very different. It wasn't stabilised. Our families had moved off Wilmaringle. A lot of upheaval in my family life, and things had changed dramatically back home. So I became a young fella, a bit lost, and I got sort of taken up in that critical time in life, that when I really needed that something else to really stabilise me.
2 brothers, 1 sister. Where do you fall in that sort of lineage?
I'm the oldest in my family, and so what I was battling at the time, when you lose your mum and your home life is not as stable, and with all those things, I really wanted to be that a leader and a role model in my family, and I took it seriously, and I tried to keep them close. So when I'd get the opportunity to do things, I want to make sure my second brother down would be given that as well. And I wanted to look out for my sister, who was sort of out there a bit sort of isolated, and my youngest brother who'd stay with my dad. So we were all separated. We never really lived together as a family again. There was such a missing link in all of that, and that obviously was our mum. She wasn't there anymore.
Yeah. When you started to play footy, did you enjoy it, or did you just see it as a way to sort of progress your life?
I really wanted to love it, and I really wanted to display all my skills and everything I put into it. But really, it became just an outlet for me to unleash all the sort of aggression and all the things that build up. And so I was pursuing footy just for outlet, and not the love, that dream of running around in your clay pan, listen to the radio, just want to play, meet my heroes and emulate them. I started to lose that and become very confused. It's a critical time, and I didn't have that stability in my life that I really, now I know what it is, because I went through that, And now I'm a father of a 16-year-old boy. I know exactly what he's dealing with. Why? Wow. Because I've been through that.
Yeah. One of the things that you spoke about when I heard you speak last time, you spoke about a program that you had initiated, saw the leadership for, really built it strongly within the police force to start with. But that was motivated by a tragic situation for you.
As things moved along in my life, I've left school. I didn't even achieve HSC qualification. I got to year 11. I started to become a little bit muddled up. I really then had this burning desire to improve the lives of our people, because I would sort of see what was happening in our community. So I built those early part of my public service life to improving outcomes for Aboriginal people. And I was really sort of going ahead. But in 1997, I got a call to say that my sister is on life support. It was such a shock, because she's on life support, and I was asking the circumstances about what happened, and they're saying there's been an incident in the Brewarrina police cell, and she's fighting for her life, and you need to get to Dubbo as soon as possible. My sister, in a town where she was born and bred, Brewarrina, she's got family on every street. She found herself in the middle of the day in a police cell, and within 15 minutes or so, she was fighting for her life. And so there was an incident there where she tried to take her own life, and by the time she could get support, it basically has gone too far. And so my sister died as a result of that incident. We went through turmoil, and as the leader of my family, I tried to shield my family away from such a downhill point in our life, and I tried to really work hard with my dad and my brothers and my sister's kids. She had 4 children, to really try and hold things together. I could have quite easily taken a different tack, but I chose what my grandmother told me. God has called you for something great. You are going to be a leader in your family. There is a time, and how would I know that this would happen so many years later? But I can tell you now, and I know that I know that I know, this was the time that God had called me for. Yeah. Stand, be still, and know that I am God. These are the things I know held me together at that time, and I know I wasn't even serving the Lord at that time. But it was the time that God had brought me to my knees. And through that, there's a program called iProud, where kids all around New South Wales are training and developing to become police officers. Why? Because my sister died in custody. And I said, I've got to change this. We've got to ensure that we don't go down this track again. We've got to train and develop our own people, to manage our own people, to send a different message to the community, to develop a good relationship between police and my people, to put a black person in a blue uniform in our communities. This will transcend our communities to a place we've never even thought we could go. That is what God has called me for, and I wanted to put it into practice instead of talking about it. That program's now been going for over 10 years. Hundreds of Aboriginal people are now police officers. More are doing wonderful things in their life. I meet young people who've been through that program. I meet their families. I hear their stories. I hear the struggles they have in their lives. And just to know that they are thankful for that opportunity because of my sister's story is something that still drives me every day.
Everyone needs to have a purpose about saying you're made for this time or this moment. And it's a powerful thing to carry for all of us. So that's been quite a number of years. You've been coaching that program through. So you got drafted up, you ended up working for and with one of our famous prime ministers in Australia, John Howard. How did that happen?
Again, it's amazing. It's how God has raised me up, and through the establishment and the promoting of the iProud program, provided me with an opportunity to raise my profile, that I stood for I stood firm on certain issues, and the Howard government selected me to be an advisor, not just the issues of Aboriginal affairs, but broader community services, and particularly on our issues and matters were dealt with through policy and its impact, particularly on remote communities, where you can make policy and put programs and services in place, but if they aren't making a difference, someone needs to tell you. And I was just honoured to be able to serve under, I would say, the greatest ever Prime Minister our country has produced. And so that experience I hold dearly, and the things I learned and the people I met has, again, assisted me to be able to do other things in my community because of that opportunity.
So, Peter, you know, you've been a great public service to our nation, to our state, and just by sharing your story to many of the people in our church here today. But, you know, your service doesn't just stop with what you've done. You're really actively still involved, like today. So tell us a little bit about what you're touching right at the moment.
I was just in the last couple of years, I got the opportunity, because of what happened in the Howard government years, to serve the New South Wales government in a similar capacity. So I moved to Sydney and I spent just on 18 months down there with the previous government. In that time, again, this burning, you know, all the time we sort of get challenges and we get crossroads, and just like the I-Proud years where you could have, you know, looked at what was going to happen, this opportunity to serve my people again and go back to the bush, based myself in Dubbo and got to work a job offer to work with the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council, a really high-level position with lots of responsibility, but to work amongst my own people, and particularly Welmaringle and Burke and Brewarrina, where all my family are. I think we've heard the expression before, if you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life. Well, that's what I've experienced, and that's why I've been so blessed through the times, particularly since Fiona had passed away, and the times that I was able to just go out every day and get paid to do the things I love to do. And being now in this position out in the bush, visiting these communities, walking up and just sitting down with the community leaders who are sometimes so downtrodden with the weight and burden of their own responsibilities for their communities. Things are not going too well. We're getting smashed by phenomenons like ICE and other things, and just to be able to be somebody who literally sits and sometimes cuddles and shares and comforts and encourages and these leaders, because I know and experience that in my own life every day, and particularly from the time of Fiona's death. And I want to be able to see that they look you in the eye and they know you care. And that sometimes, well, it certainly doesn't cost anything, but it means the most.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what I'm blessed with almost every day in my work.
It sounds like you could have pursued quite a successful career working in government, in public service and that. Why did you actually choose to go back into regional New South Wales?
Just over 12 months ago, I was sitting in my office in a multi-storey complex in Sydney, looking out, and I can see Rose Bay, I can see the yachts, I can see planes landing on the water. There was such a world away from my community. And at that very time, God had spoke to me. I picked up the phone and I rang my dad and I said, "Dad, I just need to have a chat." And Dad said, "What's wrong, son?" I said, "Dad, I'm feeling this turbulence in my gut about what I want to do." And I said, "I'm looking at," and I described a beautiful, beautiful day in Sydney on what I was looking at. And I said, "But this isn't me. This isn't what I'm called for. My call is to go out into the communities and to help my people so that I know that I'm going to make a difference. And this is going to look good for a few years, but this just isn't what I'm called for." And I said, "So I'm going home." And he said, "Son, are you making the right decision? Because you've done well and you've worked hard to get to where you are. Do you really want to go back to the dust and the no water and the social welfare problems and all the things?" And I said, "Yes." "Okay, my son. Okay, I get." He said, if it is what you're called to do," and my father isn't a Christian, "that's what you're called to do. That's what you need to do."
Wow.
And that's what I'm doing now, because I know when I drive out and it's all dust and there's no water in the rivers and there's downtrodden leaders and there's despair in the lives, I know what I'm called to do.
Well, I suppose one of the questions I want to ask you, Peter, is about NAIDOC. And what does that because it's hard for me to fully understand what that really means and what it's to achieve. So if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind asking you that question for you to unpack that for us here.
Isn't it amazing that as Aboriginal people in our country, we get recognised a week of celebration every year to recognise the achievements of my people.
Yeah.
And I treasure that. I treasure the opportunity that our country just stops and has a look into their own community about the achievements of Aboriginal people. The history is there for everybody to see and recognise, but as a country, to recognise us for a week is a great opportunity for us. And the church is taking leadership. This is what I love about being a Christian, that we take leadership, recognise the achievements of Aboriginal people, the struggles that they endure, both in the past but even current as well. But what we're trying to do is ensure that we don't go back to those things that we've come from. We've learnt from the past. Church taking leadership. The theme this year, voice, treaty and truth. We've been doing this because we've been telling the truth about it, our very existence, because I didn't come from a rainbow serpent. God created me.
Yeah.
And the truth is that Jesus Christ died on the cross for me, for you, and for everyone. And that is what I need to be able to tell my people. Look them in the eye and tell them the truth.
Yeah.
Because, and this is a great opportunity for the church to be able to encourage our brothers, our black brothers and sisters, because we do carry a burden of hurt and rejection in our own country. Yeah. But I praise God every day that He's raised us up. He's raised you up and you're reaching in, we're talking today. Yeah. Who would have even dreamt this up? When I was running around that footy field, right. Did I ever think I'd be talking to you today?
We were listening to Artie Beetson on the radio at the same time.
And this is why it's so important. So I just love and cherish the opportunity to talk with you. Thank you very much. I just appreciate that you reached out to me and to hear my story and to be able to share with your church.
Yeah, thank you. We love story. And we celebrate everyone's story. And so I think it's really important for us to hear men of God. I call you a man of God, Peter, and that you are, and a great ambassador to your people, but you can help us as well. I mean, I think it's a good question that you can help us with as a church. Like, what can we do better? How do we do better?
It's the question I get asked quite a lot.
Yeah.
And when I say it's so simple as this, that we don't look in, we look out, and help our people to stop looking down, look up. People get confused with that, but that's the message of the gospel, to share that message of love and hope, that Jesus died on the cross for all of us, black or white. Yeah. And when I came to that conclusion in my life, I battled this, and this is the story that my grandmother sowed in me at such a young age. And that's the story that as grandparents, we must share with our little ones. As fathers, what has God called us to do is to lead our families. Don't lose that vision. Yeah. For me, is for my people, well, it's what I'm doing at home first, and then I represent my community, and that God has instilled a gift. And then we talked about it before. The Spirit, that's the Holy Spirit. Yeah. It's the one that drives us and guides us. And so we understand why we're called. There is no time to waste. Yeah. So if we could just remember when we are walking down the aisles in a shopping centre and we look out for the downtrodden, the lost, the people without hope, that if they're Aboriginal, reach out. Yeah. Don't walk away, don't neglect the opportunity to instill hope in somebody, because we don't know where that can lead. I'm a perfect example that when you do that, things will change. Yeah. My auntie, who's the pastor's wife, we're only very few Christians in our family. She said, we were praying for you for 7 years consistently. Wow. My wife and I went to visit their little church. Prior to that, I was a very heavy drinker. I walked into their little church and I was nursing my daughter, who was now 20 years old. She was just a few weeks old at the time. And my uncle was singing a song that was written by an Aboriginal pastor in the bush, and it was called Jesus, you stopped me from running. Now, he wasn't ready to preach. He was just there practicing, and I just went to listen to a few of his songs getting ready. I got up, walked towards him, and he was just up the front practicing. He looked at me and he said what he could see was this little boy on his knees crying out. And it was that moment that I said to my uncle, I want to give my heart to the Lord. I want to serve him. And the song that he was singing was just speaking to me, because it was just, you've got to stop running. Yeah. It's a time when you need to now call on the name of the Lord, ask for his forgiveness. And it was, my life changed. And it was from that moment on, I was no longer the other fella. I was a new man, new creation, what God had called me for, what my grandmother had prayed for, what she'd spoke about reading those Bible verses to me as a young boy. It started to come to that point in my life when I need to call on the name of the Lord. And that is what is in every person's life. Yeah, it's that opportunity, and before it's too late.
Peter Gibbs, we are so blessed and honoured to have you here today. I'd love if you could just maybe speak into that camera there and maybe speak over our church.
I call on you today, my brothers and sisters, to think about my people. In this week of NAIDOC, that we have the opportunity to reach into the lives of many Aboriginal people right around the country. There are people who are just so burdened. They are just surviving each day. We want them to thrive, and we need you to pray for them. We need you to reach out. They could be across your back fence, down the street, in your shopping centres, in your schools, just in your community. Show that light that the Lord has planted in us for them. This is not a white man's religion. I would just encourage you to always remember us, not just during this week of NAIDOC. Think about us every day. Think about us in the community, and please just reach out. It's really simple to me to call that you would just love us and care for us. And how simple is that?
Amen. Thank you, Peter Gibbs. God bless you. Thank you for investing in us here, and we pray the next decades are your best ones yet.
Bless you.